The music died, and they were singing.
So goodbye, Mr.
American Pie.
Throw my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was
dry.
and good old boys were drinking whiskey and wine, singing, "This'll be the day that I die. This'll be the day that I die." When you write the book of love and you will faith in God above, if the Bible tells you so. Richard Manders. Oh man, welcome
Hey,
to the show.
How are you?
I love that song. That's just such a good song. Guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and boy, do we have a special guest today. My man, my friend, Richard Manders. Welcome, my friend.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh man, it's the pleasure's all mine. Do you mind if I do a little bit of housekeeping?
Sure, go for it.
So guys, as you know, we are the Greatness Machine. We're about two things: people who are living their passions and those who are creating greatness in the world. My friend Richard is doing both that, living his passions and creating lots of greatness. We're going to get to talk about that in just a second. But before we get started here, a couple of things. Guys, start a watch party. I got my team on standby. They'll be sending questions our way. Hit the like button. If you like what we're talking about, hit like button, hit the love button, do a couple smiley faces. We're going to be dropping comments in here. Might bring some music back depending on how much I want to torture Richard. But no, seriously though, you guys, seriously though, yeah, this is interactive. So feel free to send questions our way. We're going to be talking about some really cool stuff today. But before we get there, I do want to give you guys a little bit of background on Richard. Richard is a serial entrepreneur, and he is a lifelong learner, co-founder of Freescale Coaching, and author of The Laughing Rabbit, and an amazing speaker. In fact, the first time we met, I met him at Harvard University, and it was in 2016, and they brought up this guy who I took like 5 pages of notes from, whose name was Richard Manders. He did not know me then. I did not know him then, but he had this amazing talk on this thing called the Sparkle process. And I went back to my business partners and I was like, oh my gosh, I just saw there was a ton of great speakers at this entire event, but that was one of the standout talks as far as I was concerned. And what I loved about it most, Richard, was that, and we'll get into what it is, it was that this was a guy that had been there and done that. You had sold your company to a private equity firm, and then you turned around and you went out and bought companies. So you had learned a lot of things about how do you get your company set up for sale. And it's a one part craft, one part science, one part gamesmanship. And I was just like enamored by the content. So fast forward to a year later in April 2017, and I got admitted into an alumni group at MIT. Again, I was near Boston, and lo and behold, who's sitting right there in the room with me? My man, Richard Manders, and we've become fast friends since then. So thanks for being on the show, Richard.
Oh, you're welcome. Welcome. Thanks for having me here. It's really cool.
Oh man, it's great to have you. So why don't we, like, if you don't mind, just kind of back up and tell your story a little bit about how you got into being an entrepreneur and what led you to this whole thing around Sparkle, and maybe we'll talk about the Sparkle process.
Sure. So what led me to be an entrepreneur is I'm actually an engineer by training, electrical engineer. And in my career, I got really lucky in that along the way, one of my bosses saw something in me and brought me in and made me a member of the leadership team and gave me some stock options in the company. And along with that, I got a chance to have a seat at the table at the leadership team meetings and talk about what was going on with the business and what our strategy would be and so on and so forth. And the more I learned about that world versus the world that I was in of designing things, the more I just fell in love with the world of business and what it could do. And I watched this guy who was a very successful entrepreneur taking our business and taking it from an old sleepy company. It was a 100-year-old company, had been pretty much stuck in a rut for a long time, and how he took us to this place where we ended up being about 10 times bigger in about 4 years. and how all the pieces fell together with the right people in the right seats and the right program and the right strategy. And it just lit me up inside when I saw that. And I said, that's going to be my future. So from that moment that that offer was made to me, I planted in my head, I'm going to own a business someday. And from there, I ended up being an owner, counting that company, of 7 different companies that went through growth curves. 2 of them I founded, and watched what works and what doesn't work along the journey of how to make that work. And one of the things that I observed as I watched and worked in all these different businesses and interacted with lots of people and joined peer groups was this concept that most people start a business because they want freedom, personal freedom, financial freedom, flexibility, you name it. And what actually happens to most people is they start a business because they're good at something. And because of that, they're actually successful early on. But this thing backfires on them as it grows, because as the complexity of the business grows and it's going like this, as the business is growing, what's happening to your personal freedom, it's going the other way. You're getting more and more pressure from your bank, from your investors, from your vendors, from your customers, from your employees, that all start shrinking your freedom and making it that you're really under this massive amount of pressure. And so I spent a lot of time, starting with that guy I mentioned at the beginning of the story, decoding what it took to get to where you could scale your business and your freedom at the same time. And I had lots of failed experiments along the way, but eventually my business partner Wayne and I landed on how to do this in a different way, in a bigger way. And so that was the nexus of how I became an entrepreneur. Going to the Sparkle model, when Wayne and I were building our business, we had it about 10 years. We had gotten it up to about 12 million in revenue. And we started hearing from our really high performing employees, our A players on the team. They're like, where are you going with this? Because you guys are in our way of advancing our career. So we're going to have to leave if you don't start growing faster and providing some other opportunities for us. And so we started thinking about and they were pushing us to do acquisitions and things like that. And as Wayne and I were looking at how we could do that, we were already nervous about how much of our personal wealth was tied up in the business, and we really didn't have enough to do serious acquisitions. But what we did know was that we could go out and find a partner who could help us. And so we ran a process, and that's a whole long story, but we hired an investment banker, we ran a process. We ended up getting invested, and we sold 75% of the company to a company called Riverside out of Cleveland. At that time, I think we were something like the 300th platform company that they had invested in. And we were like number 60 that year, and it was June. So they're a machine that cranks out this success story of buying businesses and making them 2 to 3 times more valuable on average, about now at today, about 600 times.
Wow.
And they were an amazing company in that they brought all of the CEOs of the companies and all the CFOs and all the leaders together for these conferences every year, where we shared best practices and learned all these, the models that they used to buy a company and sell it a few years later for 2 or 3 times what they paid for it. And it was that model where Sparkle came from. So it wasn't my idea. They came up with it and said, this is the framework we want to use, that we use to take a company from where it is to where you want it to go. And you did an assessment. Sparkle's an acronym, so each letter stands for a different element that you want to focus on to make your business highly valuable. And here's the thing, even if you don't want to sell your business, every single one of the things, if you focus on them, will make your business a better business. Even if you're going to keep it forever or pass it on to your kids, these are all things that make it much, much better than what it could be any other way. Right? So we started off, we did an assessment, and then systematically over the actually almost 10 years that we were working with Riverside, we systematically moved the levers on all 7 parts of the Sparkle machine to make the company really valuable. And we ended up returning, in our case, almost 6 times the capital back to our original investors. So it worked out 40% annual return for the people who invested in us.
Wow.
And so this really
so someone that put $1 in got $40 back for every dollar they put in per year.
Yeah. Well, no, 40%. Yeah, 40% return. So basically, if you put in $1, you got about $6 back at the end of our whole time.
Wow.
When you look at that as, so if you put $1 million in, you got 6 back, right?
Yeah, yeah. You
6x
them.
Right. And it was focusing on those levers of the business model to make it highly valuable in our marketplace.
So, do you mind giving us what each letter of the word Sparkle stands for?
Sure. So I'm looking it up as we speak because I don't have it perfectly memorized, but I'm just going to go through it fast. So the first one, S, stands for scrubbed and clean. So most people who start a business, part of their MO is you start running all kinds of stuff through the business. You hire your kids, you put your boat in your vacation house, on and on and on in your business. And so it's not clean, right? It's got a bunch of messes that you have to explain when you want to sell it. And so you want to clear all of those things up that would make it scrubbed and clean. So things that are besides the obvious stuff, like, the tax issues that we talked about, also are, do you have all of your documents in order, right? If you're dependent on suppliers, do you have supply agreements and contracts with them? Do you have employment agreements with your people, and do they make logical sense? If you have business partners, do you have a partnership agreement with appropriate parachute levers to pull when somebody isn't, on board? Do you have the right kinds of insurance? I'll tell you a gotcha we had when we sold the first time to the private equity guys was because we were cheap, right? As you were miserly as a startup, we bought a Microsoft developer system, right? So we became a licensed developer, which gave you like 60 licenses for Microsoft products that were not really for us. We're supposed to be reselling them, but we used them for ourselves. And so that came back to bite us, that we had to take 60 licenses of Office and Windows and all that stuff and replace it all again. So are all your software licenses up to date? Are you up to date on all the right tax filings and all that stuff? So that's a scrubbed and clean. The P stands for a powerful management team. What I mean by that is, besides that they're good, the question really is, if you're selling your business to somebody, you're selling the future. The past is proof that your business model works, but what you're selling is this idea of a better future. And so what's important is that there's management capacity, that the people on your team aren't already at their limit, but they've got room to grow with the business. So that's having a powerful management team. Also, things to look for there are no single points of failure. So if, Darius gets hit by the bus, the company goes on, right? That there's been a backup who's been your apprentice for a while, those types of things. And that you have non-competes and upside incentive versions of golden handcuffs for your team that you have. The A stands for attractive facilities. This is surprisingly a real deal killer, right? You walk into a place, and once we got on the acquisition trail, we were out looking at all these companies. I'll never forget, one of the companies I went to look at was almost $100 million business. I think they were like in the $80 million range. And when we went to say, where are your accounting records and your stuff, they took us to a storeroom. Everything in the company was on green ledger paper, handwritten.
Wow.
For running their business. And the place was a mess, right? So do you have modern equipment? Is the place clean and presentable, right? Outside investors want to see that you care about your place and that you care about the environment for your people. So having really attractive facilities that would attract customers to you and other investors is really important. The R stands for rising diversified revenues and margins. So nothing tells the story of a business's economic engine better than looking at those 3 lines on a graph over time, and especially as ratios to each other. So one thing is to grow the top line. But that's actually easy because you can do that by being the cheapest person in the room and driving that top line up while you're busy going out of business rotting underneath. But is the top line going up? Is it diversified? We're not relying on 1 or 2 or 3 customers for the lion's share of our business. And are the margins, the gross and the net margins, growing as a percentage of revenue in the right direction, which tells you that you're running the company properly. You're making more and more money as you're growing as a percentage, right? That's showing that you're doing great leadership. So the K we kind of cheat on, and the K stands for clearly articulated value proposition and growth plan. So what that means is that you can describe in absolute clarity who your core customer is, specifically what's the decision maker in the chain, what do they care about, how do you answer these claims, what is your moat around these things that keep you separated from the crowd, make sure that you're differentiated. So that's clearly articulated value proposition. And then the second part is, are you in a market that's big and you've only got a small part of it, but you've been taking share? And what's your plan to capitalize on this growth plan? Again, you're selling the future of your company if you're putting it up for sale. And so what you want to show is, look what we did with our little bit of resources and this podunk team that we put together. And imagine what we could do with your money and your expertise to take this to the next level, right? Mm-hmm. So that's that idea that's really, really cleared out. The L stands for lots of data. The Achilles heel of most small businesses, and I define small businesses as sub $100 million in revenue, is lack of good data to make decisions on. You don't really know where you're winning and losing in most businesses in terms of how much time and energy goes into winning a sale, what customers are profitable product lines versus not profitable product lines, territories, marketplaces, etc. So you want to have lots and lots of data that proves your model and make sure that you have it clear. The E stands for excellent preparation. So if you're thinking about selling your business, you want to start this process of making it sparkle a year or 2 before you will put it on the market. So why is that? Why so far ahead? Because all this stuff takes forever to fix. If you don't have good data, it's going to take a while to get the right systems in place and collect that data. It takes a long time to renegotiate employment contracts and supply contracts and leases and all those things, so that there isn't problems with change in control if you sell your company. It takes a long time to get all of your facilities up to snuff, get all your licenses in order, make sure that you've got no single points of failure in your leadership team. These things all take years to solve. So you really want to get going on this right away and do a little bit every quarter. Just pick one quarter and say, I want to make a dent in this, and then this, and then this. And then we put an exclamation point on the end of it, which I call timing matters. And why that's important? Well, right now, what's going on in the stock market? Well, it's a wild ride, but generally it's been very, very good. So if you happen to get public companies bidding for your business, many companies are trading at 20, 30 times earnings. And so they can buy your business with the money that they've gotten from shareholders and they can give you 10 plus times EBITDA, and you're going to be thrilled to death, right? So right now happens to be a time where people are getting top dollar for their business. Despite COVID and everything else, of our 10 companies we coach, about 5 of them have sold or in the final stages of selling while COVID's going on.
Wow.
Absolutely top of the market prices. So we've seen it over and over and over again. So timing matters. Another year from now or 2 years from now, who knows what the market's going to be like. So timing it so that you can be at a point where the cost of capital is low, and valuations are high for companies, you can make a lot more money than if you were at the bottom of the trough.
Interesting. I hadn't even thought about the last part. That's such a great reminder. And so, well, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that so much. Guys, we're, as a reminder, ask questions, start watch parties. My team's on standby. They'll send questions our way. If you have any questions, Richard is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this part of business and then some. And we'll be diving into some of the coaching practice stuff you've been doing, as well as your thoughts around, buying companies. Because I know that when you did sell your business, the first bite of the apple, you went out and bought a bunch of businesses that did a bunch of roll-ups, and so you got really good at that. So talking about that, I mean, I'm kind of a newly single entrepreneur. I exited my company and I'm thinking about, buying a company to get started. When have you ever worked with entrepreneurs doing that, or what are your thoughts around going out there and doing, buying a business that you want to go and kind of do with what your first boss did? And that's actually what's on my radar is I want to buy a little company that's boring and scale it. What thoughts do you have around something like that?
Well, there's a lot of opportunity in that space, right? So if you use that Sparkle framework, you can figure out where are the holes in this, and can I solve for the one or two missing elements to make this a high growth company from being, say, a sleepy company. And really what you're looking for, our common friend, John Ratliff, talks about this concept of a Rembrandt in the attic, right? You don't know that if you don't know you have a Rembrandt in your attic, you'll sell your house for market value. But anybody who knew that that's a Rembrandt in the attic and that's selling with the house is willing to pay you a lot more. And the most sophisticated buyers figure out the Rembrandt in your attic while you don't know what it is. Right. And so it's looking for where is that. So that takes many forms, but generally it's something proprietary, something special that it's hard to recreate, takes time. So it could be customer relationships, it could be IP, could be a patent, could be a certain combination that's in your leadership team of just superstars. Could be something in your product portfolio that has a much broader market appeal, but you've just been focused on a narrow slice of the marketplace. I belong to a couple of search fund. I'm an investor in a couple of what's called search fund accelerators, which basically they raise a fund. They take super smart business school students out of Harvard and Stanford and Yale and so on. And they basically have them search for a company to buy right underneath with that same concept. And then they provide the ecosystem for this bright student to run this business and grow it in value, so then you can exit that business later on for a high market. And they're looking for the same markers: long history of profitability with not a lot of investment, and in a fast growing market, and has a handful of other attributes that I can't, that fit with kind of into that same framework, and looking for I'm trying to remember the saying now, it's the 4Ds, right? You're looking for businesses that are suffering from one of the 4Ds. So death, disease, divorce, and disenchantment, right? So that a lot of times these folks run these businesses, and if you don't scale them, it gets really tiresome because you can't afford, you hit this plateau where you can't hire really great people because you're just fighting this battle to stay where you are. And if you can find somebody that's in one of those things, right? So the first three are there's a life event that's forcing the sale of the company. The other one, which is the one I think is the most, is they're just done. They're worn out from running this business for 20 or 30 years. They don't have the energy or the enthusiasm to put renewed energy back into it. And that's where I found the best buys. Most of the businesses we bought fit into that category.
What do you think with COVID, for instance? So there's obviously probably a lot of opportunities in some parts of the space where if you looked at, let's say, I'm going to throw out the restaurant industry, right? Or if you were suffering from any of that stuff before and you're in the restaurant business or some part of that ecosystem, maybe you had a great business that was, has Rembrandts in the attic, but now you're in the middle of COVID. How do you look at something like that?
So, nothing like that. COVID won't last forever. Most of us never heard of the Spanish flu because it all happened before we were born until this came along, right? COVID's going to be the same idea, right? It will pass. So I'll use a restaurant as an analogy, right? So somebody came up with a concept. They spent a ton of money building it out, advertising, getting a following, perfecting the recipes, making it into something that, produced great returns for them. And now, by no fault of their own, they're, in a nosedive. And most people don't have enough capital to survive this, right? So what happens is there's these amazing properties that will be for sale for a fraction of the cost it took to build it. And there's a whole bunch of people on the sidelines, you being one of them, who is waiting for the right opportunity. And think about the difference of starting a place and not having to pay for the build out, and it being in a great location and so on, and being able to pick up where the other person left off as things come together. So it will take some patient money, right? But in the end, we're all going to go back out to eat. This is not, in my opinion, this world is not going to end. We're not all going to be wearing face masks a year or two from now, right? And we're all going to be going and seeing music, and we're going to figure this out. We're a pretty resilient bunch of people. And so in that chaos comes an opportunity.
So when you're looking at the search, like from the search fund world, and for again, a lot of people maybe are not familiar with that, but that's where they're basically investors put their money together, hire, to your point, a bright MBA or somebody that's a CEO that wants to go and they're literally going out and looking for a business to buy with this fund behind them that meets a certain set of criteria. How's the search fund world looking at COVID right now? Kind of like the way you just said it?
Yeah, so there's, the ideal one, ideally you want to buy a business that isn't affected by COVID, right? Because that shows the businesses that are getting through this without taking huge financial hits those are the ones that are selling for super high valuations, because people want these investments that are not cyclical, right? That's a big part of the equation. And so in the search funds, they're not looking for companies that are fire sales, right? Because that shows some underlying weakness, unless you happen to be in the restaurant or event management space. Like, there's just nothing you're going to do unless you have enough capital to ride it out.
Right.
Again, I think it's probably going to end up being a year and a half before that stuff is coming back from when this all started, before you'll start to see it coming back, and people are going to be cautious coming back. But if you can be patient, I think there's a huge opportunity out there for those distressed assets. But the really good assets, the investment thesis hasn't changed. We want companies that have strong, steady growth of gross and net profits over time. Essentially, you're buying free cash flow. In the end, that's what you're buying, and have been underdeveloped in some area that you can see, that Rembrandt in the attic, right? That there's some place where there's something that's beautiful that we could balloon out once it gets rolling, once we get our arms around this.
What's an ideal size for those companies? Like is there
every fund's different. Some are buying $100 million companies, some are buying $5 million companies. The challenge with anything, buying a company that's on the smaller side, is if you're raising money in the public marketplace, the controls and care you have to take buying a company costs about at least $1 million to $2 million to buy it, whether it's $1 million company or $100 million company. The problem is, if you're buying $1 million company and you're spending $1 million to acquire it on top of the purchase price, you got to burn that off over the next bunch of years of your hold time, because you're going to have to either borrow or spend that money to close that deal. And so it's very hard to buy small companies as a professionally run fund or organization. For an individual, it is much easier to do that though.
Oh, so you're saying if you're just a Darius who's out there I can go buy a smaller company because
Yeah.
I didn't really fully catch that though. Why is it cheaper for me as opposed to a fund?
So because a fund raises money from investors, which means they have to get, they have to be fully audited. They have to have very tight financial controls around the business. So most small businesses do not go through a full audit every year. I think you had to because you were a financial services business.
Yeah.
But most small businesses do not have to go through it. How much did you spend on an audit every year?
Oh, 100 grand, something like that.
Right. So think about what's that do to $1 million company with a 20% gross margin?
Yeah, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. So it's, and multiply that by that they have to do that over their whole hold time, right? So they have to first get you up to compliance and then hold it there, which is a very expensive thing. So you won't be competing for with search funds at the size that you probably buy at personally. So that's a hole in the market.
Yeah. What do you think that if you're an individual, because I'm sure there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there right now that are not working with search funds, or maybe you're listening to this and they're like, well, I'm just going to go, maybe go raise some money on the side and do or I'll get some debt, or I have enough of my own money. I can go probably structure some deals and roll up some businesses. What do you think? Where do you think the search funds start competing? North of 10 million?
North of 10 million. Right. And there's funds that will do smaller deals and ones that'll do bigger deals. The smaller ones will tend to have less public raising. It's more friends and family, like alumni groups and things like that will be the smaller ones.
Interesting. Yeah. I was talking to my brother about this. I was like, man, there's going to be it's probably a pretty interesting time to try to go buy a company right now. To your point though, if you're buying the stronger company, and I was talking to these guys. They're actually a scaling up company. They're one of Andy Bailey's customers, and we were just chatting because these guys bought a business up in Canada. And I said, well, what did you guys pay for it? And they said, well, we're paid like, they're like, you should expect to pay. They actually wouldn't tell me what they paid for it, but I said, what's the multiple on these things? Like 3-4 multiple? He's like, no. He's like, they were. He's like, right now it's closer to 6. I said a 6 multiple for like some little company. Really, that seems great.
It's a seller's market right now for businesses, right? So that'll be the headwind you're up against right now, and that's based on a bunch of factors, right? The biggest one being debt is extremely cheap, and so it's and relatively easy to get, and so you can borrow money at unheard of rates to buy. That just drives the prices up. And there's a lot of people like you who are looking for what's next. And all the private equity funds and a lot of the venture funds are on an acquisition. They've been sitting on mountains of money and that they got to put to work. And so they're making deals they wouldn't have made a few years ago just because they need to put this money to work. They got commitments from investors. They need to call that money and deploy it.
Interesting.
And that's what's driving the market up.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, wow, because real estate's doing the same thing. Real estate values are going up because money's cheap. So it's like,
unless you're in New York City or San Francisco.
I know.
You're in city, not so much. Now is a great time to buy property, residential property in the city, if you have a long investment horizon.
Yeah. I had a friend because I told him, I said, oh, one day I want to live in New York City. He's like, oh, you should buy a place now. I'm like, I don't want to deal with it. I'll just go make money and buy one. I'll pay up later. That's the way I look at it. Well, man, we're kind of here nearing the end of the show here, but so why don't we talk about like what you're doing with Freescale Coaching? Because I know you kind of moved from your last business to that. I'd love to chat about that for a few minutes.
So the other thing that Riverside did when they acquired us was that they told Wayne and I, Wayne's my business partner in my last business, iAutomation, at which we started from zero and built to a little under 100 million and about 160 people or so. And what they had told us when they bought into us was one of the other things that you must do is get a coach. And so both Wayne and I, we each went out and got a coach that we work with, and we were too cheap to hire a coach in the beginning. And it was such a game changer for us to have a mirror to reflect on, and somebody like in our corner who had nothing to gain but to make us better at playing the game. And so I looked at that situation and said, wow, someday it would be really cool to do something like that and help other people do what we did, which was scale our business and our freedom faster and better than we did it even, right? And keep getting better at it. So we started the coach. We took 2 years off, did a sabbatical after we sold the company, and then started Freescale. And we've now coached about 40 companies altogether. We do about 10 at a time, and we take them through a program and we graduate them. We teach them everything we know to the level they can teach it to their teams, and then we send them on their, on their journey. And it's been fantastic. It's been super fun to help these companies. We help them build a strong team, get really clear on who we are, where we're going, how we're going to get there, what's most important right now, and what are the measures of success, and then build an execution model around that and a people system that makes it all stick together and drive growth. So it's been, fantastic journey. We've had a lot of great exits from the clients that we've worked with. I mentioned earlier, we've had 4 since COVID hit that have gotten to LOIs or exits. Probably the best one was one company we work with just sold to Brookfield Asset Management, which is a Fortune 100 company, and they got roughly 10 times what they were getting offered for their business when we started working with them a few years before. So it was that was a total home run. And we've got a whole bunch of those kinds of stories, along with just people who were completely stressed out and fried from running their business. And we were able to help them get back in the driver's seat of this thing instead of it driving them and moving in the direction they want to go.
And now, are you guys using? I know you're using the scaling up model as one of the models you guys are using. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I would say scaling up is a foundational part of what we do. It's what we use. We use the whole Rockefeller habits thing to grow our business. So we're intimately familiar with the one-page plan and the rocks and priority and all of that stuff. And that's kind of the foundational stuff. We teach that in the first 6 months to year we're working with a client to make sure that we've got a clear plan with accountability and then an execution rhythm around it. And then the remainder of the time we're working on more strategic thinking and getting the company ready for recapitalization. And recapitalization, I'll say, is one way is to sell it. Another one is to bring in outside investors to help you scale so you can take some money off the table, or pass it to the next generation in your family, and making sure that it isn't a burden for this next generation, but they're actually getting handed a beautiful machine that they can imprint their thing on.
That's so cool. Are you guys, and how often when you work with clients, is it like quarterly or monthly? How do you guys?
Yeah, we work quarterly in person for 2 days. And then in between that, twice a month, we're doing a call with the visionary and the integrator in the business. So the visionary is typically the CEO, and their cohort, the COO or president or whatever you want to call it, who actually keeps all the trains running on time. And we balance those two out, and we coach them together. Wayne is very much the integrator. I'm very much the visionary in our business. And so we can bring those different skill sets to the clients as they're growing and different perspectives.
No, so the 2 days is when you're doing their strategic planning with them for the quarter.
Yep, exactly.
And then the 2 calls are what? Check-in call updates.
Yeah, so so if you think about it, what we're doing is we're taking the operating system that was in the business before we showed up, and we're giving it an upgrade. So as you can imagine, when you went from, I don't know, Windows 95 to Windows 2000, right? Well, everything was weird. Or if you switch from a Mac to a PC or a PC to a Mac, like it takes a while. So there's implementation challenges with installing this world-class framework that we're helping them with along the way. There's also the problem du jour, right? My sales manager just quit, or this major customer just pulled the plug, or whatever the thing is that comes up. That is, they want somebody who's been there, done that, been through this, to get some feedback or ideas of how to work. And a big part of it is just getting the leadership team, so the CEO first, and then the rest of them, really clear about what they want out of this experience over the next bunch of years. So that's something about monetary, something about freedom, something about choices, something about skills, something about balance, right? And we have each one of them get to a clear description of that then we do our level best to help them achieve that.
And you're using the scaling up model for a lot of that stuff, or that's really more.
Yeah, that's like the 25% at the foundation. Then we teach a lot. We're certified in top grading, so we teach people how to find the A player talent, develop and keep it. We do a lot of work. We're also certified in the Lencioni 5 behaviors framework, which is from the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Getting a healthy team that knows how to do conflict well, trusts each other, can hold each other accountable and deliver on the results, right? So that's another foundational piece. And then we layer on more advanced strategy work like Michael Porter and Clay Christensen's work to get to that, differentiators. Typically, we're working with businesses that are doing okay. And so what we're trying to do is now figure out how can we blow the doors off the market by looking at adjacencies or pricing strategies or whatever to get to that. But that's usually after we've made sure we've got a strong, healthy team with a clear business model and plan and really executing well. Now we can go to okay, let's talk about what's the meaning of life for this business and how do we, get to the top of Maslow's hierarchy from a business perspective.
What's the typical, when you say you graduate these companies, what's the typical time frame that that they're working with you guys?
3 years. We had one company that did it in a year and a half.
Wow.
And that was because they had a lot of management bandwidth. The owner of the company was very good about making sure that he was staffed for the future and was hiring ahead of the curve. And so they were unbelievably fast at implementing all this stuff. Most companies don't have that much management bandwidth. And all this stuff takes time. Just think about all the stuff I just described in Sparkle. Each one of those things is multi-week long projects of full-time work to get right.
Oh, yeah.
And so that requires management bandwidth. Now, what's the return on that investment? That's the question, right? So let's say one of your top people, somebody that's getting paid $200,000 a year, works on the project to get all your stuff scrubbed and clean, and they spend half a year on it. So you spent $100,000 on that.
Right.
What's that worth on exit? I can tell you it's worth 10 times that.
Wow.
Right? It's because you will get haircuts for every single contract that's out of whack, every lease that's off kilter, every employment agreement that's going to cause you trouble for the buyer. That stuff you will take so many haircuts, it's totally worth it. But most people are so focused in the here and now and putting out fires. And really, you've got to get to the spot where you're really functioning from a place of working on stuff that's important and not always on the urgent stuff. That's what the people on the front line should be working on. And you should be working on what's the value building things inside this business model I need to nail.
Yeah, that's so cool, man. Oh, I love this conversation. You're just filling my brain up with so much knowledge. Well, Richard, where can people find you? We're gonna get it wrapped up here. I know it's 6 o'clock where you're at, and I'll let you get back to your family. But where can people find you? And
freescalecoaching.com. Okay. And Twitter's at R Manders. Yeah,
guys, check out Richard Manders and the Freescale Coaching. There's a lot of people out there that say they're coaches. And for those of you guys that are familiar with the Vern and the scaling up methodology, they've got some great coaches, and there's a bunch of different people out there. But I will say that Richard is definitely one of the more experienced and dynamic of the coaches, and I love our conversations. I get to just have fun conversations with Richard about business all the time whenever we're together, and the fact that you've been there, done that, you exited a business that you got 2 bites of the apple on, you did roll-ups. I mean, that type of experience, there's a lot of people that coach that haven't done that. That's what I always say. It's there's people that are coaches that have literally never ran a real business, let alone went out there and bought a ton of businesses and rolled them up, and are using some of these best-in-class systems like a scaling up, like Lencioni, like the top grading. These are all best-in-class systems for scale. And the fact that you're fluent in them, you've used them in your own business, and now you're helping all these great businesses scale is just a testament to your guys' skill set. So congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Hang back for a second. I want to close out the show. I just want to talk to you for 1 minute when we get off the air. Guys, thank you so much. I'm not doing 20 shows a week anymore like I was. I'm doing just 1 or 2. So today was a fun day. We got Javon McCormick earlier today from Scribe Media, and a great show here with Richard Manders. As a reminder, guys, go out, get the book. We're in book promotion mode from here till eternity, more than likely. And we didn't even get to talk about core values. Maybe that'll be for another time, Richard. But guys, sign up at our website, www.therealdarius.com. Click on live, and you can subscribe for the show. You get updates on the shows. And also, if you go out, purchase the book. If you've gotten the book, please leave us a review. Love to see reviews online. That helps us, get promotions and get into the Amazon algorithm. The more of that stuff we get. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Have a great week. We'll talk to you guys soon. We're out of here. See you guys. Love you. Peace.